study presents compelling evidence that topical diazoxide can effectively stimulate hair follicle enlargement and regrowth in a primate model of androgenetic alopecia. The researchers found that none of these monkeys that actually used the topical diazoxide, they didn't have any weird sort of glucose tolerance or any weird impacts to their, androgen levels or hematology report. Everything returned normal when they were done using this topical treatment on them. To be honest, this sort of topical diazoxide could be something we look at. Hello everyone. Okay, let's just get right to the point here. I'm going to do a not so long video on this topic because it's just too interesting to get lost in the literature about it, so I'll just focus on the high level overview here. So what is diazoxide? Diazoxide is a potassium channel opener that works by activating ATP-sensitive potassium channels in pancreatic beta cells, which prevents insulin release. This leads to an increase in blood sugar levels, making diazoxide useful in the treatment of hyperinsulinemic hypoglycemia, a condition caused by excessive insulin production, like in the medical conditions insulinoma or congenital hyperinsulinism. Additionally, diazoxide acts as a vasodilator, relaxing blood vessels and reducing blood pressure, though it's rarely used today for hypertension due to the availability of more effective alternatives. While it is effective for its intended medical uses, diazoxide can cause several side effects including hyperglycemia, fluid retention and swelling, also known as edema, and hypotension, meaning low blood pressure. But there's an additional side effect that we want to talk about in this video, and this is the side effect of hypertrichosis, or, for those of you who don't know, that is excessive hair growth, which led some researchers decades ago to investigate its potential for stimulating hair regrowth. I want to focus on a case study posted to the Research and Innovation page on the NHS United Kingdom's website. We are going to be looking at this kid, his name is Lenny, and his story. So everyone, say hello and thank you to Lenny. Comment that in the comment section below. Hello and thank you, Lenny. And Lenny is spelled Lennie. And at the time of the article, it was posted in 2015, and then he was only 3 years old, just as a reference. Anyway, Lenny suffers from a rare condition called congenital hyperinsulinism, which means his blood sugar levels fall extremely low because his body produces way too much insulin. This resulted in him having to use diazoxide orally, which actually helped him from getting these medical seizures that he used to have because, again, when he was 7 months old, he had to deal with having such low blood sugar, so it was really bad. But this came with a side effect. He had excessive hair regrowth, and the article describes it as, quote, Lenny's head started to grow very, very quickly and became very thick. This wasn't too bad, but when the hair started to sprout on his arms and lower back, it was really stressful, not just for Lenny, but for the rest of the family too. We were worried about how unusual the hair looked on such a young boy and what it would be like if more hair grew over time, unquote. This case of Lenny provides a compelling real-world example of diazoxide-induced hypertrichosis. Unlike Minoxidil, which is primarily known for its topical use these days in hair regrowth, diazoxide was originally developed to treat hypoglycemia by inhibiting the insulin secretion. However, one of its most unexpected and pronounced side effects is this excessive hair regrowth, or hair growth across the body, making it a subject of interest, at least decades ago, right, for hair loss research. Now, we know with Minoxidil, it was initially studied to treat high blood pressure and stomach ulcers, and it also had the side effect of hair growth or hypertrichosis across the body. So between diazoxide and Minoxidil, it seems that the mechanism of action is somewhat related to potassium channel modulation and improved microcirculation that somehow stimulates the hair follicles to start growing an androgen again. But I think the difference here between diazoxide and Minoxidil has to do with, at least when it comes to the effects in terms of blood pressure, I don't think diazoxide requires sulfation, right? And perhaps even for the hair growth, I don't think diazoxide requires there to be some sort of enzyme like we see with minoxidil sulfate, right? You need the sulforatransferase enzyme to turn minoxidil into its active prodrug that actually grows hair, being minoxidil sulfate. Diazoxide seems to skip that sort of necessity for sulfation. But if anyone is able to find any contradictory information in the literature, please are welcome to comment that or send that to my email. But so far, that seems to be the advantage of diazoxide. And again, if you guys are interested in learning about minoxidil and minoxidil sulfate and how we know that it's minoxidil sulfate that is the key driver for, growing hair, and how you need minoxidil to convert into minoxidil sulfate in the outer root sheath of the hair follicle, you can read one of my favorite studies titled, quote, Minoxidil sulforatransferase, a marker of human keratinocyte differentiation, unquote, by G.A. Johnson, C.A. Baker, and K.A. Knight, as well as the paper titled, quote, Sulfation of minoxidil in keratinocytes and hair follicles and the stimulatory effect of minoxidil on the biosynthesis of glycosaminoglycans, unquote, by Y. Mori, T. Hamato, and S. Otomo. Those two papers are really monumental in kind of understanding how minoxidil needs to work in order to grow hair follicles. It has to be converted by the SALT1A1 enzyme, also known as the sulforatransferase human enzyme. But in any case, we really aren't interested in messing up with our blood sugar. We don't want to get hyperglycemia, so we don't want to use diazoxide orally. That's not the plan here. But I wonder, could we minimize systemic side effects by using it topically? Potentially, that could be something worth researching. Maybe we don't get enough systemic exposure from diazoxide, but theoretically, we can still get that localized hypertrichosis effect. And with topical minoxidil, the reason why it doesn't seem to work with everybody, there are some people who do respond poorly, although I think it's debatable. I think most people technically do respond well. But the bottleneck topically seems to be, again, there isn't an abundance of sulforatransferase for some people. So if you can somehow get minoxidil sulfate onto the scalp and use it, that could be a plus. Or maybe diazoxide topically could also be a good therapy because maybe it grows hair without the need of sulfation, right? Well, we can see this being studied in a very early primate study on stump-tailed macaque monkeys who also have androgenetic alopecia like us humans. According to the paper titled, quote, The Effects of Topical Diazoxide on Hair Follicular Growth and Physiology of the Stump-Tailed Macaque, unquote, by Uno et al., the study presents compelling evidence that topical diazoxide can effectively stimulate hair follicle enlargement and regrowth in a primate model of androgenetic alopecia. Now, again, this study was conducted on these monkeys, right, rather than humans, but this is significant because non-human primate data cannot be overstated. Among all of the animal models, primates share the closest biological similarities to humans, particularly in terms of hair follicle cycling, androgen sensitivity, and even skin physiology. This makes the results of the study particularly encouraging, as it suggests that diazoxide's effects on hair growth in these primates could translate well to humans. So when looking at the methods of the study, topical diazoxide 5% was applied once daily, 5 days per week, for 16 months. The study demonstrated that the topical diazoxide significantly promoted hair regrowth in the bald frontal scalps of all 5 treated macaque monkeys, whereas control monkeys, in this case, the vehicle only where they didn't get the diazoxide, they didn't show any significant changes. Hair growth was observed as early as 5 to 6 months into treatment, and the follicles continued to become larger throughout the 16th month study period. The frontal bald regions transitioned from short vellus hairs to long, thicker, and pigmented terminal hairs, similar to the way minoxidil works. One thing I like about this study is the fact that they didn't have to use the topical diazoxide 5% every day of the week. It was only once a day for 5 days out of the week. And to be honest, maybe minoxidil works the same way, where you could just put it on the scalp once a day for 5 days out of the week. I know minoxidil has a topical half-life of around 24 hours. So long as you have the necessary sulforotransferase enzymatic activity, that's why some people can miss a day or two out of the week. As long as they're using minoxidil long-term, they should still get the benefit. But here, I think if you're focusing on reducing the systemic impacts of topical diazoxide, maybe using it 5 days out of the week could be a friendly approach. But I'm also taking into account that they use topical 5% diazoxide on these monkeys, and these monkeys are really small compared to us, right? So maybe we could probably withstand a higher topical concentration, maybe even 8%, 5 days out of the week. I'm just thinking here. But again, it's probably best, if this were to be used in humans, to stick to the 5% once daily application 5 times a week. Anyway, going back to the study, the histological analysis, or the biopsy that is, showed that the topical diazoxide group had enlarged hair follicles, prolonged anagen phases, and accelerated the sort of hair cycle. Unlike systemic diazoxide, the topical treatment did not induce hyperglycemia or cardiovascular changes or any abnormal androgen level or hormonal shifts in the monkeys that were treated with it, suggesting little to no systemic absorption. However, when the treatment was withdrawn and they stopped using it on those monkeys, the newly grown hair gradually thinned out and fell out of the scalps of those monkeys, and they kind of reverted back to their bald state, indicating that continued application was necessary to maintain hair growth. Again, the researchers found that none of these monkeys that actually used the topical diazoxide, they didn't have any weird sort of glucose tolerance or any weird impacts to their, androgen levels or hematology report. Everything returned normal when they were done using this topical treatment on them. So I think there should be some research on this, and I'm not going to do a full-scale literature review, but nevertheless, I think it is possibly worth crowdfunding such an operation. And that being said, I've been making the rounds lately talking to researchers, actual researchers by the way, not just some online randoms, but people who work at academic institutions, professionals, professors, at starting some sort of collaborative innovation lab where certain things are tested to see if they induce hair growth. And I'm still trying to work out the kinks in this process, but all in all, it seems to be going in a positive track. And to be honest, this sort of topical diazoxide could be something we look at. So if this sounds like something you're interested in contributing to in a fully IRS audible way, so you can see where the money actually is going, definitely leave a comment in the comment section below saying something like hair innovation. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you on the next one. Peace out, guys.